and welcome to another episode of Get Your Popcorn. This week we're going to be deep diving Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I know I've done two kind of serious, more blockbuster films, but what you guys don't know about me is deep down I am not only a Disney adult, but I am absolutely Scooby-Doo obsessed. It is my favorite cartoon of all time. I love the movies. I love the original TV series. I love most of them. The couple of new TV series that have been released since like 2010 on aren't really my favorites, but I love the movies, especially this one. I'm betting if you're a 90s kid like me, you've probably seen it. This came out in 1998. It was a batch of 4 movies that came out after the series in the 80s that just included Scrappy-Doo, Shaggy, and Scooby. It was sort of the reuniting of the gang before we get into the What's New Scooby-Doo era of Scooby-Doo. I do stand behind this film because I do think that this is a film that would translate well outside of the Scooby-Doo sort of universe. I think if this was a horror thriller movie that was released and you take out the casting of the cartoon characters and you just put in real life characters minus the dog, the movie would still work. The script's good, the story's great, it's really creative, it's really fun, it's really funny, and it genuinely is scary. If you compare it to the other Scooby-Doo movies, any of them, this movie is by far the best and by far the scariest. Now, this isn't an Oscar-worthy film or anything. I love this movie. But it is a direct-to-video movie, and obviously I have a fair bit of nostalgia for this film. This film came out when I was like 3, so take this with a grain of salt. I probably saw it for the first time then, but I enjoy this film as an adult. I definitely watch it in and around Halloween every year, or if I can't decide what to watch, like this is my comfort film. So, I mean, if you're into Scooby-Doo, this is definitely one that I would recommend seeing. You probably already have. Or if you're listening to this and you haven't watched Scooby-Doo in a long time and you kind of want to jump back in or give it another try, this is definitely the film I recommend. The other films that came out in this like 4-film series are Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, which is we see the introduction of the Hex Girls, Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, which I think is by far the weakest entry in this group, and Scooby-Doo and Cyber Chase, which is the one that they're trapped inside the video game, which is probably my second favorite in the entire Scooby-Doo universe in terms of movies. But Zombie Island leads the pack. This film actually does have a score of 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it did fare well with critics. So it's not just me. Critics like this film as well. They did do a sequel that came out to this movie, I think in like it would have been 2018, 2019. Don't watch that one. Return to Zombie Island. It sucks, and it takes everything good about this movie and throws it out the window. So if you watch this one and you love it and you see Return to Zombie Island, just don't. Not great. It's especially so disappointing because this one was so good. When I read that one was coming out, I was so excited about that. And it really disappointed. So don't bother watching the sequel that came out in 2019, I believe. But here's a quote from Variety about the film, and it says, "The film is at once extremely rooted in classics, yet willing to do something never before seen. The greatest of them all, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, gets everything right." So this is a bit of an unorthodox recommendation because it isn't a classic film or a big Hollywood production, but it really is worth a watch. So we'll go over casting a little bit. Scott Innes plays Scooby-Doo. He's fine. I think I'm used to Frank Welker, who also voices Fred, voicing Scooby-Doo for a good majority of the movies that they've done, because he's done that since I think the mid 2000s, right after Scott Innes. So the voice is fine, but it is definitely different than probably the one you are familiar with. And unfortunately, we don't have Casey Kasem back in this film to play Shaggy. There's Billy West. He does a fine job, but of course Casey Kasem is the classic voice of Shaggy, who's now been replaced by Matthew Lillard, who played him in the live-action movies following Kasem's death. But, Casey Kasem is the iconic Shaggy voice, so I do feel like that's an element missing from this film. Frank Welker, of course, voices Fred. Frank has voiced Fred for every iteration of Scooby-Doo other than when they're played as kids in a pup named Scooby-Doo. So there is no Fred without Frank. We have Mary Kay Bergman as Daphne Blake. She voices her for the first few of this movies, but in Cyber Chases when Gray Desley begins to voice her, who has continued to voice her since then. So I think it's been post-2001, it's been the same actress. Maybe here and there it's swapped out, I think, maybe for Monster in Mexico. Anyway, I'm sure you can probably tell that I really like Scooby-Doo from how well I know this off the top of my head. We also have a notable smaller supporting character. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, voices a character named Snakebite, which is kind of fun. And then Jim Cummings, Winnie the Pooh, as better known, he voices a character named Jock. We also get a really iconic song called It's Terror Time Again by Sky Cycle. I love this song. It's one of the music montages. It's featured in the film. Yeah, I definitely put it on my Halloween playlist. It's great. It's really, really catchy. So to kind of mirror real life, the film starts and the gang has kind of parted ways. They're all doing various things. In real life, the entire gang had been showed together in a franchise since 1984, and we're now in 1998. So it had been a while. Anyway, so they've all gone their separate ways except for Daphne. Daphne and Fred are working together, and Daphne has a ghost hunting TV show, and then Scooby and Shaggy have just been doing various jobs, and Velma owns a bookstore. Fred invites the other members of the gang to get together for Daphne's birthday, and they ended up going on a haunted road trip. They encounter the usual suspects, all the mysteries that Daphne's trying to capture, these real ghosts for her show, turn out to be the bad guys that they always get. Some bad guy in a mask who's a real estate developer or a banker or whoever who's decided to create this elaborate monster scheme in order to scare people off. Daphne is, of course, very disappointed because she's trying to get real paranormal activity caught on camera to spike ratings for her show. They're discussing this while they're in Louisiana, and they're overheard by a woman named Lena, and she says that the place where she works is haunted. It's called Moonscar Island, and so she invites the gang to come to the island and see. The island is named after Morgan Moonscar, who was a pirate who allegedly kind of buried treasure there. The gang's fairly skeptical, but Daphne very much wants this footage, so they agree to go. They take a ferry over, and the captain is a man named Jacques. And then while they're taking the ferry over, they pass by the guy called Snakebite, who's played by Mark Hamill, whose entire mission in life is to catch this big catfish named Big Mona. When they get to the island, they meet Lena's boss, Miss Lenoir, and she owns a pepper plantation. There's also a gardener that we meet in there called Beau. He seems kind of grumpy and sort of irritated at the gang and sort of brushes them off. The island is also infested with cats, which, because Scooby is a dog, or has dog characteristics sometimes, in this film, he hates cats. We see in much later films that he doesn't really give a shit. But in this film, he hates cats, so let's go with it. So they head into the plantation, and Scooby and Shaggy are kind of alone in the kitchen, and they begin to scream because this writing appears on the wall. The gang and Lena and Miss Lenoir come rushing in, and Daphne tapes the writing as it's being written. Another word gets written out. After they review the footage and slow it down, and they can see the ghost of Morgan Moonscar with a ghostly sword writing into the wall. And they've now captured a real ghost on film. Velma goes back to the wall and begins to scrape at the wall and the words, and then uses a spatula to scrape off all the paint. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were in somebody's beautiful plantation home that they invited me to and I had just met their worker today, I probably wouldn't be scratching off paint on their wall. But it reveals a big panel of a ship, that the house is actually made out of parts of Morgan Moonscar's ship. Now, I don't know if any of you are into paranormal stuff in real life. I totally am. And objects can hold spirits and meaning and things like that. So I think they're trying to incorporate that element of like maybe some of the spirit of this pirate is kind of contained within the walls of the house. And now because it's a Scooby-Doo movie, hijinks are going to ensue, and Scooby-Doo and Shaggy get into a little bit of them with the cats as well as Mojo, the hunting pig, who is Snake Bites, pig that he takes with him anywhere. So Scooby-Doo and Shaggy are sort of running around, and during this process, they fall into a big hole. And while they are down there, they realize that they've fallen into a grave. There's kind of this creepy mist, and then they see a skeleton hand which falls from the side of the grave onto them. The mist then turns into a skeleton which starts growing hair and clothes and becomes the zombie, and it is the ghost of Morgan Moonscar who then begins to chase them. And they, because it's a cartoon, can fly up into the air and run out of the grave, even though 10 seconds ago they were not able to do such things. And who do they run into not 10 feet from where they were? Bo the gardener, who can't see the zombie anywhere and doesn't believe them. They then go back to the house to let the gang know what's happened, where they then investigate all together to find that the grave is empty and there's no sign of anything. After that, it's been dark, and Lena and Simone show the gang to their individual rooms. And of course, because it's Scooby-Doo and it's formulaic, the hijinks ensue to just Shaggy and Scooby. And as Shaggy's getting ready for bed, he's looking in the mirror, and his reflection is a Civil War ghost that comes out and tells him to get away, which is the same message that Morgan Moonscar had left for the gang in the kitchen on the wall. Of course, the gang comes in, and Velma investigates and agrees that the mirror is from the Civil War era, because Velma knows everything just sort of magically, but they can't see any evidence of the ghost at all, and then they head down to dinner. Scooby-Doo gets into an altercation with the cats, and then him and Shaggy are both booted out of the kitchen by Miss Lenoir, and they have to go eat outside in the Mystery Machine. And during the dinner conversation from the gang that are still in the house, they're discussing sort of the motivations behind why they're being scared off. And they're sort of suspicious about whether or not this is another man in a rubber mask thing. Like, what's under the island? Is it oil? Is there gold? What's going on? Why are they being scared off? We then flash forward to Scooby and Shaggy eating in the Mystery Machine, and they get into a hot pepper eating contest. Of course, they eat ones that are so hot that they decide that they're going to run out and drink water from a nearby lake. Soon, zombies rise up out of the lake and they start chasing them, and this is where we get the iconic Terror Time song as they run through the forest. This is just a classic example of a Scooby-Doo music montage as they're running and trying to escape. I think this is what kind of is the cornerstone of Scooby-Doo episodes and why they're so fun. And it's part of the reasons I don't like ones in sort of the later or the newer ones that are being released or the newer series, is because they have kind of lost touch with this, like, music montage where you get a super catchy song and you see kind of like more of the funny hijinks of it. I think this is just a really good scene. And as they're running back towards the house, who do they bump into again? Bo, who is suspiciously kind of scouring about with his lantern late at night. But they run into him, and he looks quite scary at the angle with the lantern kind of backlighting him, and so they think he's a zombie too, and they keep running. The gang hears all the screaming, they go outside and bump into Bo, and then they decide to all split up and look for Scooby and Shaggy. Velma pairs off with Bo because she wants to discuss his suspicious activities, and Daphne and Fred, of course, because I think behind the scenes there may be something going on with the two of them. They split off and also look for Shaggy and Scooby. Fred and Daphne find the abandoned Mystery Machine, and as they're doing that, a zombie puts his hand on Daphne's shoulder, at which she grabs the hand and kind of throws the zombie off. She sees another hand coming out of the bushes, and she reaches out to throw them, and she accidentally throws Shaggy as well. The first zombie is still laying there unconscious, and so Daphne films, and Fred tries to pull the what he thinks is the mask off the zombie, and he pulls and he pulls and he pulls, and he realizes that this is not like their other mysteries, that the zombies are real. And in the pulling, he pulls the zombie's head right off. And the eerie green fog happens again, and then all these zombies start rising up. Fred records, gets it all on camera, and then they run away, but of course lose the cameras. They're doing it into, because it's the 90s, quicksand. I think all millennials have a weird fear of quicksand because it was present in a lot of films. I've never heard of anybody running into quicksand in real life, but if it's a 90s movie, there's going to be quicksand. A thing that the gang notices about the zombies, as they aren't just pirate zombies or the Civil War, that they're from all different eras. There's modern looking zombies who look like they were on vacation. They're wearing Hawaiian shirts. And so the gang wonders why there's the zombies from all these different eras. So they all run and they all get split up again. Scooby and Shaggy are on their own, and they fall into a cave and they find voodoo dolls of the gang, and they begin to pick them up and move them around. And we learn that these are real voodoo dolls because it flashes to the gang who's all together. And of course, when Shaggy and Scooby pick them up or move their arm, the dolls, the real life characters are doing that. Bats then scare them out of the cave and they run away. And Velma, both Daphne and Fred all return to being in control of their own movements. They go back to the mansion where they find Lena, who is very upset because she says that Miss Lenoir was dragged away by the zombies. She shows them a hidden tunnel that we're supposed to believe is from like the Prohibition era. But as they're walking down the tunnel, they notice that there's footprints on the ground and not drag marks. Velma comments on this out loud, and she sort of clicks it and puts it all together that Lena and Miss Lenoir have lied to them and lured them down to this tunnel for some reason. And at this moment, it's too late. And Miss Lenoir has the voodoo dolls that we earlier saw from Shaggy and Scooby, and she ties them together so they are all trapped. Fred, Daphne, Bo, and Velma. And because this is a Scooby-Doo movie, the villain likes to explain why they have done everything. And so we get a flashback scene, which I think is done really effectively, where Simone, or Miss Lenoir, is explaining everything. And her and Lena were a part of a society that was present on the island. The cats were like a big focus of their society. That's why there's so many of them on the island. The island was then invaded by Morgan Moonscar, the pirate, to hide his treasure and for him to take over. While she's beginning to explain this, we jump to where Scooby and Shaggy are at. Lena didn't bother to make wax dolls of them because she thinks that they're idiots. Scooby and Shaggy are running to the ferry. They're running for their life. They don't care. They're going to leave everything behind. And they run into Jacques, the ferry captain, who all of a sudden turns into a werecat. Or a werewolf, but I'm trying to explain what it is. It's a cat creature. Back in the cave, Lena and Miss Lenoir have also turned into these cat creatures. While they're explaining this story and their goal for immortality, Velma accuses Miss Lenoir of stealing the pirate's treasure, and Miss Lenoir corrects her and says that it was more revenge because Morgan Moonstar drove her peaceful settlement into the bayou where they were caused their death by the alligators that live there. Lena and Miss Lenoir escaped and prayed to their cat god for immortality and to destroy the pirates. Their prayer is answered, and they are granted immortality, but in order to do that, every time there's the full moon, they must absorb life from others. So essentially, they turn into these cat creatures. They must turn others into the zombies by absorbing their life force. So that's why you see all these zombies from all these different areas. These are all the victims that Lena and Miss Lenoir over the past couple hundred years have lured back to the island and stolen their souls. So this is where the gang realizes that they were lured to the island to be sacrificed on this harvest moon by Lena. that they are about to be turned into zombies. Lena and Miss Lenoir also reveal that they included Jacques on this and promised him his immortality in order to help him lure and bring victims to the island for them. And because this is formulaic, we now see that the gang is starting to have their life forces drained from them. They're starting to turn into zombies. And Scooby and Shaggy, just in the nick of time, come running in and knock their voodoo dolls out of the way. And so, while Lena and Miss Lenoir are then distracted, the gang gets kind of brought back from their zombie-like state, and Velma sees that the voodoo dolls no longer are no longer being controlled. So she is able to wiggle hers close enough to remove what is binding them, and the gang is then free to mobilize. Daphne explains that the zombies are the good guys, and because Shaggy and Scooby have now rushed in, Lena and Miss Lenoir go after them, and they begin to drain their life force. But as this is happening, the gang makes voodoo dolls of Miss Lenoir and Simone, and then are able to throw them off Shaggy and Scooby-Doo. But as this is happening, we see the sundial move past midnight. It is now too late, and the curse has now broken. We see the zombies, and then Miss Lenoir and Lena and Jacques crumble into dust. And then we see a Civil War ghost rise out of the ashes and say thank you to the gang because they have broken the curse, and all the zombies' souls can now rest in peace. Daphne is left disappointed because she knows that although she now has this amazing real ghost story, they lost all the footage that they had in the quicksand, and no one will ever believe her. Bo was then revealed to be a detective who's been investigating the disappearances on the island, and he was undercover working, doing his investigation. And then the film ends with them riding back on the ferry to the mainland. So I think for what this film is, which is essentially just like a kid's cartoon with a slightly scary plot, it is executed really well. And I think it's executed well via the music that accompanies it really adds to the emotion and the kind of tension within the film. The voice acting is on par with, I think, all of the others in the series. I think it's good, but the story is really creative, and because it isn't, lots of parts of it are quite formulaic, but because we know that the monsters are quote unquote real, it adds a supernatural element to this film that isn't present in a lot of the other ones because we know that they're fake, where this one, the zombies are real, everything's real. Watching it as a kid, I remember being really scared of it in a way that I just wasn't with the others, because this is meant to be real. I think if you have any sort of interest in paranormal, it adds a little bit of an element of that too, which for me really spikes my interest as well. So yeah, this is a really fun one, a recommendation. It's a lot lighter than the one I did last week, because that was It's a Wonderful Life. This adds some nostalgia, some campy charm. This movie's not going to change your life, but it is a fun watch. If you have kids at home who like Scooby-Doo, I definitely give this one a watch. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining in, and have a happy new year.